Marty Coleman and Brian Dunleavy here with episode 5 of the Juice Box Junkies. Brian, I see you're sipping on a cold drink there. What you got?
Hey, I got, well, first I have my Astros Stadium, cup here. Little nice highball glass there, or lowball glass, I should say, with my, Irish whiskey hanging out in there.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, I don't think you'd want me on Irish whiskey on this podcast because I'd probably fall asleep. Probably couldn't handle it. I'm kind of a beer guy myself, and that's about it. A few of those strong drinks make me do crazy things, so I'm gonna stick with the beer. It's funny because one time I went to Belize one year, and I was much
Mm.
younger then. I went to Belize, and their beer, they only had one, and it was about twice the alcohol of General American beer. And yeah, there were some crazy nights in Belize. But we'll start we'll start off the podcast talking about the lockout as we talk about it every week. This is episode 5. We've talked about the lockout in 5 episodes. Won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I feel like obviously it's the biggest news in the game these days, or the non-games as it were. So we need to talk about it. And both sides have made incremental improvements in their positions, but nothing major. The February 28th deadline imposed by the owners doesn't seem like it's going to happen. My son, he's 15. He's hopeful that something happens by that next Monday. But here we are, Wednesday evening. We have had no breaking news, no big news saying, oh, they've made any progress on the major issues, right? It's all the minor ones, and it's always like a little incremental. Nobody's meeting in the middle, so to speak. We talked last week, and I was of the opinion that the players also had some responsibility, right? This is a negotiation, bargaining, not a one-sided meet us where we are, but meeting in the middle. It seems like neither side wants to do that. I'm very doubtful we're going to have an agreement by the 28th, and therefore I'm very doubtful the season is going to start on time.
Yeah, I can't imagine. That's why I have my beverage here, because they got proper 12 here. The Conor McGregor, beverage. But I think that's about all the entertainment you're going to get here, in the meantime, because they are so far apart. The one sad but true reality, and I don't know if you want to say I told you so kind of facts, but you know they sat they sat around, didn't talk this whole time, didn't do anything, met every for the past month, met every so often. So the only good part that you can even say is that they're meeting like daily. That's about it. That's the only progress that has been made, is that they meet more. Whether or not they actually get anything done, that's a whole nother separate thing. And they're not really getting anything done. I just was reading an overview, and they're still light years apart. And it's all money based. And as you alluded to, Marty, most of the time I want to give the players the benefit of the doubt, but you know what have we done over the past week or two? I mean, what really have we accomplished? What are the players really saying and begging? Hey, we need to meet. We need to meet. We need to go over this. We need to save the season. I don't think that the players care if we miss spring training or not. I really don't. We've talked about this before. They don't get paid anyway, so I don't think they will have any problem missing spring training. But what's hanging in the balance now is, and why they're meeting so often, is because if they don't get it done here soon, now we're talking about paychecks, regular season games being missed, paychecks being missed by players and owners. Cash flow coming from those things also being impacted. So that's, I think, the only reason why they're meeting so often. I don't think that they're like both coming to terms that, oh, we really need to work this out and make a deal happen soon. I think it's more of, well, we want to make as much money as we can, so if we can finagle it out of the other side, then we will.
Yeah, I think the long-term goal. I think the players are willing to suffer short-term for the long-term goal, um, which they see as necessary. And in previous years, it didn't seem like they were willing. They seem stronger this year than they have in the past. Now, when it comes time to when it comes go time on April 1st, and they're not receiving those large checks that they usually receive, some of them anyway, we'll see how long they hold out for. I just want both sides to be able to negotiate and to give. Easy for me to say, I'm not the one giving up the money, right?
Yeah.
Or the benefits.
Yeah.
Easy for me to say sitting here in Kyle, Texas, but I just find it hard to believe they haven't moved any further than they have. Deadlines are supposed to spur action, and we've got a deadline, and we're not seeing much action.
No, and with that money amount, like you mentioned, what going, they're not really going back and forth on it. If anybody's watching this on a regular basis, the only hope that you can ever get from any of these things, if you start seeing the dollar amounts change, like
Right.
we demand this, and then they say, oh, well, maybe we'll do this. But so far, the only dollar amount that's changed that I'm aware of is that the players came down a tiny, tiny fraction of a bit. They didn't, the owners didn't do anything. They had no response. They had no, oh, you went this way. Oh, we'll go our way too, and we'll kind of try and go from there. And I think that was you know the players trying to make their good faith show, that say it's not us, it's them, kind of a deal. It's kind of a public thing, because really the amount that they changed was almost nominal
Right.
anyways.
Right.
But you do that, and the owners just say nope, and they're the shrewd, if you will, going some historic novels here. They're the shrewd money lenders, Ebenezer Scrooge of the of the world here. They want to nickel and dime you for everything you got.
Well, we were talking before we hit record, and I was saying I'm trying to explain this to my son, who's mostly on the player side this time. But I told him, this is a negotiation. This is a bargaining. Bargaining is not sitting there and saying, no, we're not moving off our, whatever, $200 million demand. That's not bargaining. That's demanding, right? If they just came down, let's say, to 180, um, that is a 10% or whatever, and that's a huge you're giving a huge amount to the owners, and maybe the owners will come up to 120. Still nowhere near close agreeing, but at least there's movement, and you can see the discussions. As you said, what's happening right now, it seems like, is I'm at 100, you're at 200. Okay, I'll come down to 195. Okay, I'll go up to 105, and we're not getting anywhere. And I just fear we're going to miss games. As you said, apparently the owners and players don't fear missing the game. I'll be shocked if if we have a deal by the 28th, as I said, and we start on time. Um,
Not gonna
leading,
happen.
not going to happen. Okay, and today I wrote an article for Climbing Tal's Hill that kind of is affected by this lockout. It's Lance McCullers Jr. doing an interview saying that his rehab, first of all, he said his injury was worse than the Astros let on last fall, that his tendon was detached from the bone, and that. But the important thing is that his rehab is affected by the lockout, because he can't, with the players locked out, he cannot work with the Astros personnel and in the Astros facilities. And he pointed to the last time the NHL had a work stoppage, they let injured players rehab with the clubs, right? The NHL did, but the Major League Baseball is not doing that. So his rehab is not progressing as he had hoped, and he may not be ready for opening day, but may not be a problem, because it sounds like opening day is not going to be on April 1st. But still, he's not going to be able to work with Astros staff and facilities until the lockout is solved. So it's delaying his rehab. Something I had never thought about, right? I didn't even think about, okay, that means that I knew they couldn't be in the facilities, but I didn't realize the injured players were not allowed to work with the staff. So first of all, the injury is worse than expected, which is a setback in itself. And second of all, due to the lockout, he's not able to, not just him, but any injured player is not able to work with the the staff that they would typically work with. I had a Twitter response to the article saying, yeah, but he's got millions of dollars, he can find his own. Right. What happens if something happens or the Astros don't agree with whatever rehab is proposed by that person? Does he have to start over when they sign? Is he putting his next contract at risk by, the Astros saying, well, that's not the rehab we wanted, and we believe that may have set you back? So it's the simple answer. It's too simple to say they have millions of dollars. They should just go ahead and get their own rehab. Sure, it sounds nice, but they have tens of millions at risk, and I would be doing the same thing Lance McCullers is doing if I was him.
Right, and you can't belittle obviously the amount of money he's making, but he also, and this is what I think, you have to understand from that perspective too. I mean, whatever he does, he is jeopardizing whether or not he's going to get paid that 5-year, $85 million contract that he just signed through 2026. I mean, he's trying to make sure that he gets all of that, and whatever he does is a club approved, number one, but also gets him the best place where he needs to be back to 100%. And I wrote about this too at the beginning of the lockout. That first came out, the information about him that was apparently not true. Writers and rumors and things that came out said that it wasn't too bad. It's just a strain and all this stuff, and nobody said any of those kind of details. And you knew they know. I mean, they knew that from that time period. I think he had two different opinions on what was going on. So you know that the Astros knew exactly what was happening, and as you alluded to with typical lockouts, they do able, at least if you're injured, or you're able to work out and see the physical trainers and see the the training staff and use the training facilities. But that is not the case this year, and that's what I was writing out about before. And he said that before in December is. They have the symbolic lock on the gate at Wrigley or wherever the park is, and so players literally cannot get in and cannot get to the facility. And sure, he could go with an outside provider, and they probably have a pretty decent amount of equipment, but I guarantee you that the major league equipment in their training facility is the best in the world, and you're not going to get that outside of the Astros training facility unless you're ponying up a lot of money, which I'm sure any injured player who's making more than McCullers has already made is in that facility. And so you're kind of fighting for a spot. And like Verlander, for example, he was doing all his rehab in Florida. So you're not even in Houston. You're not even, where everything's happening. So he'd probably have that additional cost too. He'd have to sit somewhere, rent a house or buy a house somewhere, or rent one of the guys' house, go to that facility. And Verlander was doing that on a daily basis, all throughout the playoffs and everything. And he'd have to have the same regime, because arm injuries are tough. Arm injuries, that's why, we talked about this earlier this week. That's why those surgeons are some of the richest in the world, because they perform miracles. And if they can do it right, you're making the team and the guy a lot of money. And if you do it wrong, then that's the end of the career. So,
yeah.
You don't want to mess with that sort of stuff. Arm injuries are tough.
Yeah, you do not want to jeopardize your next contract by going, as you said, someone outside the team. So, and one other takeaway from that, it was advertised the first time I saw it, as he said he is going to miss the start of the opening day, but that's not what the video said. The video said he wasn't sure, and that his rehab was slowed a bit by the lockout. So just to be clear, hasn't yet said he's definitely missing opening day, that he may miss opening day. Okay, this week's minor leaguer we're going to talk about is Shawn Dubin. I've done Matthew Barefoot and Joe Record in the last 2 weeks. Brian, this is your guy, Shawn Dubin. Now, we looked him up earlier, or I looked him up. I hadn't read much about him. 6'1" and 171 pounds, and it said he gained 30 pounds. I'm hoping that was after the 171, and he didn't gain to 30 to get to 171. Tell us about Shawn Dubin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I had a couple different articles I was referencing for this. When I was looking at him earlier as one of the top prospects in the farm system left, and Chandler Rome had written something back in the middle of January on him. He's really kind of a Cinderella story of a player, drafted in the 13th round in 2018. For his signing bonus was $1,000. Now, if you're not fully aware of how that works with the minor leaguers and that system and everything, you really don't make anything at all. You're making like less than minimum wage to be a minor league baseball player. So to have a signing bonus, that's kind of your lifeline. That's how you make it through. And so for him signing for that, he's really playing because he loves the game. It's not because of anything else. So Houston just recently added him to the 40-man roster in November, so that he wouldn't be subject to the Rule 5 draft, which is a big step, which means that the Astros see anybody on that 40-man roster. You could see him easily popping up here. My guess is he will be the first man or second man out of the system if any of our starters get injured, or he'll be the first man or second man up in the September expanded roster call-ups. And the one thing I really do like about him, I'll go run through his stats, but instantly when you see any pitcher, I'll go back to my days and facing the one time I faced Justin Verlander in college. I mean, he's throwing upper 90s, and there's a huge difference. You wouldn't think it between a 97 mile an hour fastball and a 92 mile an hour fastball. You think 5 miles an hour, no big deal. But it's a huge difference when you're sitting in the batter's box and you have that little bit less time to react to what's going on. I can do 92. 97 is tough. And so he's throwing upper 90s. He's got 4 pitches that he's working on, and he's currently working through with the Astros staff down there in the minor leagues. He's got a pretty good slider that Chandler Rome said was one of the organization's best sliders that they have. So that with the upper 90s, if he can really solidify those other 2 pitches and throw strikes with them, look out. He could be one for the future, and a guy that they lean on coming out if they need to, especially if we have some of those issues like we had this past year with injuries over the past season when we had multiple starters out. And just to wrap up on him and the stuff that I have, for this past season, he was in AAA. He was 4-3 with a 3.44 ERA, and had a pretty good run of it, but didn't get as much opportunity. Obviously, 4-3 is as much opportunity in AAA as he could have had, but I think he's primed to go that quickly from low A ball to high A ball to AAA. Running through the system just over the past year, and to perform with a 3.44 ERA in the minors and AAA, I think that says a lot. 69 strikeouts over 49 innings. So he's a guy to look for in the future. He's definitely a guy that, as I wrote about, he's one of the guys that's really impacted by not having a spring training. He would be able to really show his stuff and show out and show the potential for him if we had that spring training.
Well, first of all, you buried the lead here. You faced Justin Verlander in college.
Yeah, that is.
How'd that go?
I had one at bat against him. He was playing Old Dominion. We were playing at Old Dominion for there. I pinch hit and went in against him, being a lefty, so had that advantage. I worked the count. I got to a 9-pitch count through him. I fouled off a couple of good ones down the line, but just a little bit late because it was 97. And then he has a devastating changeup for lefties. It looks exactly coming out of his hand, looks exactly like a fastball, and you're trying to catch up to 97, and then he drops one in there at 89 as a changeup that breaks down and away. So he got me on that one. I just hung my hat and I said, yeah, see ya.
There is no shame in swinging and missing against Justin Verlander. It's funny you say that because I never played past high school, but I had some friends who did. One of them who made it to the major leagues, and I think back in the day he threw 92, which is probably equivalent to 97 these days, right? Pitchers have gotten faster and things have changed a bit, but he played when we played all growing up together. And against each other going up. And there was a time in, I think it was Pony League, where the team he played on had him, who, by the way, was a 19th overall pick in the draft one year, an All American at University of South Carolina, and another guy who made it to AAA with the Giants. So think about the poor Pony League teams that had to face those guys, right? Two pitchers, which all you only played 2 games a week, so that's all they needed. And to say they ran through the league was obvious and a lot of fun. But he made it up with the Angels, and then kind of traveled around a little bit, and ended up with the Orioles one day. We were sitting and off topic, but we were sitting having some beers in a bar in Charleston, South Carolina. He gets a phone call, and it was the Orioles. He'd already gone home. He'd pitched in AAA that year, and the Orioles wanted to call him up for September. Things have changed a little bit since then again. And next thing I know, 3 days later, he's pitching for the Orioles. And it's crazy, crazy times. But so I know I faced somebody who threw, like I said, 92. He's not Justin Verlander, obviously, but I know what it's like, and man, I swung and missed so many times. It was pitiful. It was pitiful. So I've been there. Back to Shawn Dubin. You believe he was going to be the first guy called up when the first or second guy called up when the Astros need help. That's interesting because I haven't heard the name of Lott. I'm familiar with him, but it seems like more of the other guys get the run. The same old, Anoli, Paredes, and Andre Scrub, and the other guys that are typically up. So I hadn't heard that. So it'll be intriguing to see if he is one of the first. Tyler Ivey's another one before he got hurt last year. It'll be interesting to see if he's the one who gets the call, because we know pitchers are going to get hurt and miss starts. That you don't go through the season without that happening. So it's going to happen at some point, whether that's April, May, or later in the season. It's like I always say about like offensive linemen and defensive linemen in football. It's not a matter if somebody's going to get hurt, it's when, right? Is it going to be in April? Is it going to be in August? Who knows? We know pitchers will get hurt. So someone to follow, Shawn Dubin. As I saw, he was the 13th round draft pick, the 402nd overall selection. So he's literally come from almost nowhere to making a major league roster, which is always fun to follow, right? Somebody you wouldn't think at the number 402 would have a chance of making it to the majors. Speaking of maybe getting into the rotation, you wanted to talk about the future of the Astros rotation as you see it.
Yeah, and that is also the hard part that goes along with this, and the difficult questions that lie ahead. And I had I think one person commented on the article that I wrote about the future of the rotation, because right now obviously we're in a lockout, so we don't have anything else to talk about. We don't have to talk about spring training. We don't have games to talk about, so we might as well break down what does the future look like ahead. And here's the real question, and this is number one, and then we'll go on from there, and maybe we can bet this back and forth first. But who's your ace? That's the question. You have Justin Verlander, who we signed for a year, and from that, I believe it's a player option for year number 2, and I could be wrong on that. It's either, but so if I'm James Click, I'm thinking at the most I got this guy for one season, and it might be a half a season at this point. So what do you do next year when spring training rolls around? Who's your ace? Is it the guy we just talked about that's currently injured, McCullers, that steps up as the ace? I mean, McCullers has had some dynamite seasons, but he's also gotten injured multiple times with the same recurring injury. So that's a big question mark for me. What do you think about that ace prospect, Marty?
I think uh, I think Lance McCullers is a very good pitcher, but I think he's subject to injury, and that's maybe not a fair thing for me to say that those injuries can happen to anyone. But much like Carlos Correa did last year, I think he needs to prove he can make it through a season without being injured. I think that it's hard to be an ace when you are out there for 22 starts a year, right? You have to be able to depend on that ace to be there. I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying that's the way it is, and that's the way you have to look at it. Um, and that's tough. It, and we can talk about this as we continue this conversation, but I keep reading and hearing that the Astros have too many starters or they have a ton of starters. I don't see it. I mean, I guess I'm more of a show it to me kind of guy. I think Luis Garcia had a great season last year, but I expect him to regress this year. All of the underlying metrics say expect regression. McCullers is often hurt. Verlander's 39. Christian Javier, we all want to talk about him, and when we get enough of us on here at one time, we will. I think he should be starting, but they can't find a place for him. Um, I, Back to McCullers. I'm sorry, I got off topic here.
No, you're good.
I think he needs to be healthy for a full, solid year. Show me that he can throw, what is a 200 innings, maybe 180, 190, yep. 200 innings, something like that, before I believe he's a candidate for being an ace.
Well, and leading off of that too. I mean, and you led into it perfectly. There's all this talk saying the Astros have too many starters, and while I agree with that in theory, here's the question, and this was my big thing in the article I wrote, and the number one question I have is who's number one? There is no clear right now. If you sat down and you say it's 2023, Justin Verlander said no thanks. I'm going to play my last season with Detroit so I can get back to the team I started with or something like that. If that happened, you sit down and you say, okay, well, McCullers is the likely choice for number one, but then what do you do? Astros, the rotation numbers 3 through 5, they're all question marks because each one of them had a great season, but we don't need a great one season. We need great many seasons from our starters. So, Luis Garcia, Framber Valdez, last year, both of them had, outstanding seasons and seasons that they have not had before, and they really showed out. And this year before that, the COVID year, Jose Urquidy was lights out in the playoffs. He had a great season. He was, I think people forgot about that. Maybe they just didn't watch because of the everything that was going on, and it was really crazy watching the COVID year and everybody being quarantined and whatnot, and people not playing. But Urquidy performed really well in the playoffs. But great, you do that, but we need a full season from you. We need a full season from you. We need a full season from Valdez. We need a full season from Garcia. All of them to really measure, and that's it seems kind of lame what I wrote about, but that's really what I wrote about. Each one of these guys had a great one season. Until you can show me back-to-back years, 2 years in a row that you can do the same thing, I don't have a place for you in the rotation. I can say right now, based off of last season, I can say Framber Valdez is number 3. I could say Luis Garcia is number 4. I can say Jose Urquidy is number 5. I could say that just based off of last season until they prove me wrong. But what if they prove me wrong this year? What if Luis Garcia is the biggest question mark in my mind? I mean, what if he just has a completely different year this year? Maybe Urquidy steps up and he's number 4 and Garcia is number 5. Maybe for some reason Odorizzi has to go in there in the rotation. I don't know. There's a lot of question marks in my mind. I would think, if it was somebody, especially, we talked about prospects before, somebody like Forrest Whitley who has all this hype and stuff behind him. If a guy like that stepped into the major leagues and had a season like they did last year, then you'd have a little more confidence because he had all the hype coming up. These guys didn't have the hype.
Yeah, I think it's a huge question mark. I think even this year, you talk about next year, Verlander has an option. I think it's a question mark this year. McCullers is hurt. We just had a segment about him not being ready on time, whenever, or for opening day, whenever that may be. So Verlander's 39, coming off surgery, hasn't pitched since July 24th of 2020 in a game. You know, your two biggest pitchers right there are thought to be aces, are both in delicate situations, and who knows what we're going to get out of Verlander. My suspicion is we're going to get classic Verlander, the guy that struck you out, right? And
Yeah.
McCullers is going to get better, but when's he going to get better? Is that going to be June, July, and will he get hurt again later in the season and miss part of the playoffs or all of the playoffs? There is a lot of unknowns. I mean, think about this. There's so many unknowns. I know he's under contract, but Jake Odorizzi is still being considered, as a possible starter at some point at some time. The guy that didn't seem to be able to get anybody out, and I think that's what confuses me. They talk about having too many starting pitchers, and they can't get Christian Javier into the starting rotation despite him being much better as a starter than a reliever. But here we are talking about guys that are coming off injury, guys who are injured now, guys that have a year under their belt, as you said. No, I wouldn't consider someone, when I think of an ace, I think of a Justin Verlander type, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I consider an ace, not somebody who's played for a year or two and is 11-8 with a 3.98 ERA, right? Um, Not that ERA is everything, but you get my drift. It's Justin Verlander of the world. It's Syndergaards of the world. Those type of guys are your aces, not Luis Garcia, who's a nice piece, had some great outings, but you can't be an ace and go 5 1/3 every game, right? You need
Exactly.
seven. You need seven, right? Your bullpen's going to be worn out by June or July if you need 3 2/3 from them every night.
Well, and the big question too with that, going back to that too, and I didn't bring it up yet, but I think that talk's all great. However, when you get to the playoffs, how did those guys perform? Name one of those three guys that you said their whole playoffs was fantastic. Not one of them.
Yeah,
They were all question marks. Fromber had a good game. Garcia had a good game. Urquidy had a decent game, but none of them had ace
right.
material game or even number two starter material game. I wouldn't put him up. I wouldn't put either of those guys up against the number two in the playoffs. They're all three of them are fighting for the three hole to get innings really in the playoffs from what they did this past season. Now, sure, they got their experience. Maybe it's a different story this go around, but from what I found, and we talked about this before doing the eye test. You know, when players get into the playoffs, they have two conclusions usually. Either they outperform in the playoffs because they're a playoff caliber kind of guy and they're used to the spotlight and they want that big standout moment, or they kind of crumble a little bit because it's a lot of pressure, a lot of extra things that they're not used to, and you know it's hard to say what we're going to get when you have such up and down performances. I think Valdez was the only one that really had multiple performances that were decent, but again, nothing like he had performed in the season.
Well, and here's the test for me. One of the tests being an ace, and you mentioned it. When you are surprised at when someone does well, when you're surprised that Luis Garcia had the season he had or had the good game in the playoff, that tells me they're not an ace. When you expect that, like you do from Verlander or Cole back in the day, that tells me that's an ace candidate and likely an ace, right? When Verlander goes out there, even in the regular season, and throws eight and gives up 3 hits and a run and strikes out seven and walks one, you expected it. And you go, yep, that's Verlander. If Luis Garcia did that, if he made 8 innings, you'd go, wow, what a great outing, and you're like,
Right.
Okay, no, it's just an outing. It's an ace's outing, right? Maybe he's not ace material, and I don't mean to bag on Luis Garcia. He's a good pitcher, and he may
Right.
win 15 games this year, and that's nothing to sneeze at. We're just having the ace conversation and somebody you can depend on. Maybe he'll grow into that. I don't know, but I'm doubtful.
Yeah, and I don't know that, and that's the big question. We don't know the future for any of those three guys. And I would say if I knew James Click better, which I really don't, it's kind of a question mark what he does. During crunch time with all those, like this year with all the trades right before the deadline, or what he's going to do, what moves he's going to do. My question is if these three guys, I think this is the test. If these three guys can't have a solid season, let's say one of them has you know, and I'm not saying this is the worst season you can have, but if you have a 4.5 ERA and you regularly give up hits and walks and you have control issues, my question is, does Click pull the trigger on one of those guys, trade him at the deadline to get whatever value he can, maybe for the bullpen or someplace that needs an extra help because of what happens during the season? My guess would be yes. My guess would be one of those three guys. If they don't perform this year, that they might be trade bait coming, this trade deadline.
Yeah, because I don't think there's much in the minor leagues to trade to get anything of any value, right? So maybe somebody's going to want a pitcher, a game-ready pitcher, even though he didn't work out for the Astros. That's not to say he might not be a valuable piece for another team to build around, and a team that has time to grow and is not in the position of the Astros, who are obviously trying to contend for champions. What a great conversation to have, and I think, assuming the season starts at some point, is one that we can continue to monitor as the season goes along. And who knows, maybe we're wrong. Who knows, maybe we're right, or more likely we're somewhere in between. Somebody will work out really well. Somebody will go to crap altogether. Um, I'm putting my bet on Justin Verlander, at least for this season, because I think he just has it, and it is
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to. Some guys get a 25 million, and you go, oh my God, what's he going to do? He's got 25 million. I'm not worried about that at all with Justin
No.
Verlander. He's a
No.
veteran. He's an ace. He's a Hall of Famer. He may not be the same, but by God, he's going to give you the effort to try and be the same or even better.
Absolutely, and I'm right there with you. I think that's spot on. I think your top three, I think we'll have for the playoffs. I think we will have a decent three to go. I think McCullers comes back strong whenever he comes back. And if I'm the Astros, especially if things are delayed and if they have any kind of spring training or anything like that, he's just recovering the whole time. He's doing rehab. We're not worried about him. We're just getting him back healthy. And if I have JV and I have McCullers as a 1-2, and I need maybe one win a series out of Framber Valdez, for example, I'm fine with that. I'm happy with that. And the other two guys can contribute, through the pen or those long starts if somebody falters, like Valdez has a bad start or something. But I'm fine with that. I think the bigger question is what happens in the future.
Yep.
Is a guy like Dubin sooner rather than later. I don't know. We'll see. Should be interesting.
We'll be seeing, and we'll be seeing. We'll see. And with the lockout in effect, we'll have more time to watch some minor league baseball and check out I was going to say the Sugarland Skiers, the Sugarland Space Cowboys. I've already got the app on my phone for minor league baseball. All I got to do is hit the button, and I got a feeling we're going to be watching a lot of minor league baseball till middle of May or so.
Yeah, yeah, in college for sure.
Yes.
I always enjoy some college baseball games in the spring.
Yeah, it was really nice this weekend having college baseball. My son even watched it with me. He's not a college baseball fan at all, but he realizes and recognizes might be the baseball we get to watch this year, at least for foreseeable future. And he's trying to get into it. But the umpires, he's not sold on the college umpires yet.
No, those guys, they're local guys, and I know several of them from when I was playing that I also had in high school. So they're not top tier guys necessarily. They might do all over the place from high school up through college, just because a lot of times you just need to fill those positions. So
Right.
you're not going to get the you're not going to get you're not getting the robots, at least, I guess. But
Not yet.
we'll see.
Not yet. All right, Brian Dunleavy, I appreciate your time today. 0 for 1 against Verlander. I'd say you get him next time, but I don't think there's going to be a next time. But what a story to tell. You got to bat against Justin Verlander. My friend I was mentioning got to pitch against Don Mattingly, who was my hero growing up. And
Yeah.
I asked him what happened. He said, I threw 2 on the black. He was 0-2. I threw another one on the black. He hit it off the center field fence. And he struck out Wade Boggs on 3 pitches one time. I think that was the highlight of his career. But Mattingly wore him out that day. He had 6 innings at Yankee Stadium with only allowing 1 run, but Mattingly, I think, was 3 for 4, 3 doubles or something. So
must have been Tampa Bay Wade Boggs then.
Yeah, here's the funny part. When the Mattingly, I was like, really hit the ball? He did. I was a young kid. He did. He goes, oh yeah, that's you, man. Go ahead, pull for your heroes and not your buddies. So, it's the way it goes, man. It's the way it goes. Anyway, great conversation, Brian. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you next week. We'll have some of our compadres here with us, but if not, we'll carry on.
Sounds good.
Have a good one.
All right.